The past few years have been riddled with uncertainty for many. We have seen changes impacting access to health insurance, reproductive rights, and gender-affirming care. Unfortunately, many of us do not know what to do or where to go next, as policy limits our choices in medical decision-making. Where do we go next? As healthcare professionals, we are uniquely positioned with expert knowledge to impact and affect change. In a time of feelings of uncertainty and fear, there are steps we can take that can have real impact. We hope this lecture will help you to more fully recognize your power. With Grand Rounds this morning, we hope to provide you a framework and case example of how you can advocate for issues that are meaningful to you and our society. I have the honor of introducing our two distinguished speakers this morning. First, Luz María Henríquez holds a JD from the University of California, Berkeley. She has a track record of advocating for equity in education, particularly with students. She has experience with the legal services of Eastern Missouri and the Children's Legal Alliance Unit and founded the Education Justice Program. She has been awarded the Missouri Diversity and Inclusion Award and serves as the Executive Director for the ACLU of Missouri. Next, we have Dr. Jennifer Smith. Dr. Smith came to St. Louis for medical school here at WashU and stayed for residency in OB-GYN. She joined the Consultants in Women's Healthcare following the completion of her residency and has served on the board for the St. Louis Maternity Hospital Society. Pertinent to today's topic, she is co-founder and president of the Missouri Healthcare Professionals for Reproductive Rights and has firsthand experience in advocacy. We hope that her experience will inspire you. We're extremely grateful to have you both here with us today, and please join us in welcoming Luz Henríquez and Dr. Smith.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me? So first of all, I want to just say a huge thank you for inviting me here today, especially to OUTmed and to Tony and Eric, who facilitated this session. And I want to just say I'm grateful for everyone coming out at 8 in the morning. I know that's not too early for doctors. I happen to be married to one who is sitting in the back over there. So again, thank you for coming. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about our organization, the American Civil Liberties Union of Missouri, the work that we do, and how we work with medical health care professionals to advocate for the rights that we are advocating for. And then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Smith, who has been an incredible supporter of our work. And who is really, truly the case example for how medical healthcare professionals can be involved in advocating for the rights that they care about. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with the ACLU of Missouri, our mission is to defend and extend civil rights and liberties. And so we are a nonprofit organization who really works to hold the government accountable to extend and expand those civil rights and liberties and to defend them. We do our work through a multiple advocacy fashion. So we are very, very well known for our litigation. You often will read about our work in the newspaper and the court battles that we fight to defend against government interference and intrusion on our civil rights and liberties. We also work up in the legislature. We do policy and campaign work. We work at the ballot box. We work in community education and engagement and what we call narrative advocacy, telling the stories of the people who are impacted by the issues that we are working on. We are also an affiliate here in Missouri of our national office. So we have 54 affiliates across the country, and we are all connected with each other. That being said, the ACLU of Missouri and each affiliate really sets the tone and direction for their state or for the area that they cover. And we are very, very fortunate to be connected nationally because it gives us a really good viewpoint of what attacks are happening in other states, which often mirror what happens in our state, and it allows us to collaborate across the country on best practices and how things worked in one state and what we could do in our state. So I talked a little bit about our integrated advocacy approach. I've listed the different approaches that we use here. One of the things that I like to say is I have been an attorney for a long time. I really believe in our court system, and because I was an education equity attorney for many, many years, one thing I can tell you is that fighting in the courts is not enough, because if fighting in the courts was the avenue to effectuate change, we would have integrated schools by now. We do not, I can attest to that. So we need a multi-pronged approach, which is why the ACLU of Missouri engages in other forms of advocacy to effectuate that change and to make sure that that change is long-lasting. So at the ACLU of Missouri, I mentioned, each affiliate sets the tone and direction of what they are working on in the area that they cover. We cover all of Missouri. We have identified the following priority issues. Voting rights is a priority issue. We are in an election year. We know that the right to vote is instrumental to creating our democracy and to holding our elected officials accountable. We are in a state, which we're going to talk about, with a total abortion ban. And so reproductive rights and freedom and restoring reproductive rights and freedom is a priority at our organization, particularly this election year. In addition, our trans community is under attack. They are living in fear. They are exiting the state. And so trans justice is one of the top 3 priorities that we have identified that we here in Missouri must defend and must protect. We work on a whole host of other issues because civil rights and liberties, your constitutional rights under the Missouri Constitution and the US Constitution, is very, very vast. And so our other issues often intersect with our top 3 issues that we were just talking about. So I'm just going to go through them really quickly. We do a lot of First Amendment work, protecting the right to speech in the context of some of our other issues that I mentioned, like trans justice. That may look like protecting against book bans that were written by trans folks for the trans community. So we have a lot of book banning cases. In terms of protester rights, your right to go out and protest, we have protester cases. We do government transparency, so in order to hold our government officials accountable, there is what we call the Sunshine Law, which allows the public to access public documents. And you would not believe the number of calls we get from citizens who are trying to obtain public documents from their government and are being prevented from doing so. And so we do a lot of Sunshine Law work, and we have done it in the past, for the purpose of making sure that we can see what our government is doing. We engage in privacy protections, police reforms type issues, and we do school to prison pipeline work because we also understand the intersection of the education system and all of the other systems that we've been talking about, including voting. So I wanted to just briefly highlight our work on gender-affirming care and really use that as an example of where healthcare professionals have supported our work and engaged in our work to advocate for gender-affirming care. We really believe that it is important and a right for trans individuals to make medical decisions about their care without interference from the political branches of government. It's an important bodily autonomy right, and so it is an issue that we are taking on. And just by way of history, last year, Missouri passed what we call SB 49. SB 49 really prevents access to gender-affirming care for trans youth and puts them at great risk. We have healthcare professionals who are working with us, who are telling us and showing us all the major medical association-based evidence that speaks to gender-affirming care and the necessity for this life-saving care for trans youth. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we are fighting back against SB 49 and how the medical healthcare professionals in this state and out of state have been helpful. So I talked about legislative advocacy. That is up in Jefferson City, where we go and we speak to our locally elected officials and lobby them for legislative change. Our legislature works a lot like all the other states' legislatures and our national legislature. We have a House, we have a Senate, They debate publicly on issues, and there's also a lot of lobbying that happens behind closed doors. So there are opportunities to provide public testimony, and there are opportunities to lobby behind closed doors. And in both of those opportunities, medical healthcare professionals can have great impact. We work with folks who are interested in advocating for change and help support them in training them on how to talk to our legislators, either behind the scenes or publicly, and how to put together what their message is, really honing in on the medical impact and the impact on the healthcare and the doctor-patient relationship, provider-patient relationship, so that they can talk to the legislators and the legislators can ask any questions that they may have of this provider who is really the subject matter expert. One of the things I want to note is you can advocate in either your individual capacity or your organizational capacity. In your individual capacity, that means that you are not a representative of the institution that you are associated with, and you don't name the institution. You really just speak from your experience as a provider, but you're not there as a representative of that provider. That's important to note because we often get folks who want to engage with us, but are concerned that if they do, that they will have to run it by their employer. One of the things that we say is if you're in your individual capacity, speaking on your personal behalf, not mentioning your provider or your employer, and making it clear that you're not there on behalf of your employer, you can still do this work. And so here we have an example of a pediatrician who came to testify against SB 49 publicly. And I took a quote from their public testimony is online, you can pull it up. Basically, they go up to the podium when the debate is being heard over whether to pass SB 49 or not, and they speak about their experience as a healthcare provider, the impact it would have on them, and the impact that it would have on their patients. They also spoke about the medical-based evidence for gender-affirming care for trans youth. I wanted to contrast that to this testimony, who is someone who is testifying in their organizational capacity. One of the things I want to note is, so this is where they say, I'm here on behalf of the chapter of the AAP, and here's who we represent. That is them testifying on behalf of that institution, that entity. And one of the things that I like to encourage folks to look when I'm showing these two slides is that really the message is similar and the same, and the impact can be similar and the same. So just because you can't speak on behalf of your institution does not mean that you're not going to have similar impact. We know that doctors are trusted, medical healthcare professionals are trusted by patients and by legislators, and we have seen changes happen because there have been medical healthcare professionals who have been there to debunk some of the myths around the healthcare that we are speaking about. So I talked about community engagement, community education, narrative advocacy. We work with healthcare professionals who want to either put out an op-ed piece in the newspaper about an issue that they care about that touches on medicine, or who are being called for an interview, and they want to conduct the interview. Again, you can do this in your individual capacity. So here is an example of a healthcare professional who put out an op-ed piece about SB 49. And they really spoke to the attacks on trans youth getting the care that they need, how it is life-saving, and they added in there the medical-based evidence and how this is taking, SB 49 would take the ability of healthcare professionals to provide the life-saving care that is evidence-based. It was posted, it was in the KOMU News, and there are many, many other examples. In this particular case, again, this healthcare provider did not identify their institution, was speaking in their individual capacity, and was really trying to get the message out about how this bill would impact trans youth and the harms that would come with it. So we talked about gender-affirming care, SB 49 as an example. One thing that I didn't have up here is we are litigating against SB 49, and healthcare providers have been involved in that litigation. Southampton is a healthcare provider that in its organizational capacity is a plaintiff along with individuals who are being impacted by this bill. That is more in the organizational capacity. In addition to that, I sat through the preliminary injunction hearing to try to prevent SB 49 from coming into effect. We had 3 medical professional experts who were speaking to the safety and the need and the evidence for gender-affirming care for trans youth. They do that in their own capacity, but that's part of what they've built for themselves. This is what they do over the country. And so they associate themselves with their own organization that they have built for the purposes of providing the expert testimony based on their experience from providing care to patients. I wanted to pivot to the abortion petition initiative that we are working on, which was filed by a retired pediatrician. I'll tell you a little bit more about that, but I wanted to set the landscape about what reproductive freedom looks like in Missouri and where we are right now. Okay, so I'm not going to go through the entire history of access to abortion, but I want to just note that in June of 2022, Missouri enacted the trigger ban, which basically banned all abortions in Missouri. In addition to that, I do want to note that other reproductive care is at risk in Missouri. Prenatal and childbirth care has been at risk, postpartum care, birth control. Our legislature will engage in debates over banning birth control. Abortion care has already been eliminated here in Missouri. Miscarriage care and respectful birthing conditions are at risk. So these are all the issues that we are looking at. So I want to just stress that Missouri is a very, very hostile state when it comes to reproductive freedom. And it is a very, very important right to be able to make decisions about your family and your reproductive care along with your provider. So in order to get to the story of where we are in terms of trying to restore access to abortion and to protect those other reproductive freedom rights that I listed, I need to talk about our constitutional right in Missouri. So the Missouri State Constitution provides a form of direct democracy to the citizens of Missouri. This is not a right that exists in every state. It is in the Missouri Constitution. That comes in the form of what we call the right to referendum, which is the people's right to take something that the legislature has passed to the ballot box for a vote of the people, and the initiative petition process, which is the people's right to take something that they want to change in the Missouri Constitution to a vote of the people to enshrine rights in the Missouri Constitution. So I'm going to focus on the initiative petition process, which is how we have gotten to where we are with respect to the abortion petition. So I mentioned that I'm losing track of time. But a retired pediatrician filed 11 potential ballot initiatives to restore the right to abortion and to protect additional reproductive freedom rights. Back in March of 2023, thank you. Back in March of 23. That process usually requires, so that's the first step in initiating the initiative petition process, taking something to a vote of the people. So she filed 11 potential ballot measures which would change the Missouri Constitution to enshrine a right to an abortion and to protect the other reproductive freedoms that we spoke about. Once you file your potential ballot initiatives, there is a whole process that has to happen that typically takes 54 days. in order for you to get what we call the ballot summary, which is the thing that everyone sees on their ballot that summarizes what that petition, what that amendment would do, and says vote yes if you agree with this, vote no if you disagree. That process typically takes 54 days. I can tell you in this case, it did not take 54 days. So when you file those potential ballot initiatives, the state auditor gives you a fiscal note, which is the cost that it would pass, his assessment of the cost that it would pass to amend the Missouri Constitution in this way. The Attorney General certifies that fiscal note. Then the Secretary of State gives you your ballot summary language. We came in because we had to fight at every step of that way in order for Dr. Fitz-James, who is the retired pediatrician who filed these 11 potential ballot measures, to go through that process. Initially, the Attorney General refused to certify the fiscal note that the auditor had issued, claiming that it was incorrect. We spent the entire summer litigating against the Attorney General all the way up to the Missouri Supreme Court to force him to certify the fiscal note that the auditor had issued. The Attorney General claimed to be auditor and inflated that fiscal note to the billions. And so we were happy to step in and protect Dr. Fitz-James' right to take this issue to a vote of the people and to order the Attorney General to follow the constitutional, democratically required process for our democracy. Once Dr. Fitz-James received her ballot summary language, which was issued by the Secretary of State, it was really, really, really terrible summary language. It misled the voters. It was riddled with just partisanship type things, very, very biased things. It talked about life, and I have not looked at it recently because it was really terrible. We litigated that issue as well on behalf of Dr. Fitz-James to get fair ballot summary language because it was biased, it was unfair, and the standard is it has to be fair and unbiased. You can't put your own political spin on what on the ballot summary language for the changes just because you don't want people to vote for it. So we litigated against the Secretary of State. That took many, many more months. We ended up with really great ballot summary language that really informs the voters what they're voting on. That process, I will say, took just way longer than it needed to, and it was intentional. The Secretary of State did not want to get this on the ballot, and they know that if they are thwarting the process, the longer it takes to get to the next phase, which is signature collection, the harder it is to get on the ballot. So we received fair ballot summary language, thankfully. The courts threw out everything, pretty much everything that the Secretary of State wrote because it was so unfair and biased, and the court's opinion was, all the way through appeal, was we could not use anything that you provided, Mr. Secretary of State, because it was so biased. So I joke that they did keep like a word, I think it was the, in the ballot summary language. So Dr. Fitz-James worked with a coalition of folks, a coalition of groups who are interested in reproductive freedom. Once final ballot summary language was issued, that coalition realized that there is a path forward to restoring abortion access and protecting these other reproductive freedoms in Missouri. That coalition formed to create Missourians for Constitutional Freedom. And the next part of the phase, which I referred to, is once you have final ballot summary language, in order to get on the ballot, you have to go out and collect signatures. You have to collect over 170,000 signatures. It depends because the way that our system works is you have to collect in 8% of voter signatures in 6 out of the 8 congressional districts. So those numbers can look differently depending on what districts you're looking at when you're submitting your signatures. Signature collection is very, very time-consuming and very costly, and the shorter amount of time that you have, the more costly it is, and the harder it is to get those signatures. But there is a path forward to collecting those signatures. We are actively collecting signatures, and I'm gonna turn it over in a few seconds to Dr. Smith to tell you all about that and to tell you about her involvement in the Missourians for Constitutional Freedom effort. I did wanna note that we have had healthcare providers working with us for Missourians for Constitutional Freedom every step of the way. As Dr. Fitzjames was fighting in the courts, we had providers putting op-ed pieces, which is part of that narrative advocacy, about why it was important and how our state was trying to thwart our democracy and how it was interfering in the health care that providers needed to provide to their patients. We had providers going out and providing education to the non-medical community about why this was important and why they should care and why they should have an eye on this. And now that we are at the signature gathering stage of this campaign, providers have really been helping us with fundraising and signature collection. Dr. Smith will tell you she and I are often in rooms together talking about this issue and talking about why folks should sign the petition, why they should fuel the ballot initiative, the campaign for the ballot initiative, and how else that they can become engaged. So with all of that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Smith.
Thank you. It's good to be back. So my journey starts probably back in 2016, like a lot of people. After that election, I realized that my passionate feelings about what was fair and what was right and all of that didn't turn out to be enough. That's not an uncommon story. But I did learn in that period of time that you need to put your money where your mouth is and you need to get involved. And also, if you look around, doctors are not generally these people. The business community, the legal community, they are organized and they get shit done. But as doctors, we want people to like us, we're worried about our patients and all of that, and we don't get out there and do these things. So in 2018, I started giving money, I knocked on doors with another doctor, a pediatrician, and we realized it wasn't that scary, it was okay. It wasn't super effective, but it was an entree. After 2018 was over, I kind of dabbled in some other things. I did start giving money in, for me, what was large quantities, not what it would be for, a Danforth or something, but anyway, for me. And I chose Planned Parenthood and actually HRC appropriate to this. And because of that, started getting to go to meetings, go to luncheons, meet people, and it was somewhere in early 22 or late 21 where I was at an event with Luz and other people from the ACLU. And at that point, it was pretty clear that Roe was gonna fall, and my whole life, that's been my bottom line voting issue, so this was definitely something that I was anxious about. It's what we do every day with our patients, and this was something that I felt like I could really sink my teeth into. But I felt very lost as to what would one do. This was at the Supreme Court. I'm, a little doctor from St. Louis, and it didn't really feel like there was much I could do. But I heard that these smart women in the room seemed to have a plan. They seemed to be working on things. They seemed, not outright telling me, but indicating that perhaps they had worked on ballot language and perhaps they saw a path to victory here in Missouri. So I kept showing up and I kept talking to people, and eventually Dobbs did happen, Roe fell, and what I saw was that people in Ohio, people just like me, were organizing, and they were doing it really effectively. And I don't know if you guys paid attention, because maybe it's my issue and not everybody else's issue, but these Ohio doctors were super organized and they were getting attention. The press, not just locally, but nationally, were picking up on the fact that doctors cared about these issues and doctors felt that this was a healthcare right and not a political right. The public doesn't see us as Democrats or Republicans, and so we're just doctors. And I think coming out of COVID, that was surprising to me and probably to a lot of you, because we felt pretty beat up during COVID in terms of it didn't really feel like doctors were the voice of reason in medical issues, and perhaps it's because we didn't position ourselves there. But in this issue, it turns out that doctors were a respected voice and people were paying attention. So with some help, we went ahead and founded Missouri Healthcare Professionals for Reproductive Rights, and you can see our mission statement there. And I'm not great on social media. I try to avoid it. So, you know, if you were more involved, then probably more people would see your posts. But between me and some other people who worked with me to co-found, reaching out to our connections and asking them to reach out to their connections, we really did have a reach across the state and have people in Springfield and Kansas City and St. Joseph, Columbia here, and at this point, over 400 healthcare professionals, from social workers to nurses to physicians in all fields have joined this cause, because I think physicians really did want to be heard and are really tired of our issues being hijacked by politicians. Okay. No? How do we make this go?
Should be this.
Okay, I thought so, but it's not moving.
Did we go through some?
I don't know. Okay, it's not just me. That's fine. Anyway, so, you know, we organized this group, and the first op-ed that I published was in the Kansas City Star and also in Springfield. We haven't had much love from the Post-Dispatch. It's a little annoying, but whatever. Anyway, so they published our letter, which was a fairly benign letter, basically, this is not it, basically stating that this is a healthcare issue, that to take care of our patients, politicians need to get out of our issue and let us take care of patients in the ways that they need. So that was the first thing that happened. I wrote more and more. Other people wrote some too, but I became like super passionate about it. And every time there was an issue like mifepristone or what was happening in Texas or anything else, you know, I wrote an op-ed. And also letters to the editor, and I will say the only other thing that I have published on was actually the transgender issue, because similarly, I feel like as physicians, we have allowed the issue, unfortunately, to really be hijacked by politicians, and I feel like this is an issue that you could really sink your teeth into. I was thinking about it as Luz was talking. I have learned so much about what resonates with voters, and, you know, I was interviewed for something for Time magazine. No, it's not there. Anyway, and you know, all these people were interviewed, people who are really knowledgeable about the political process and legal terms and all of that. And when the article came out, I thought, I sound kind of dumb. And these people sound really smart. But the feedback that I got was, the point that I had made about my patients and what I knew about patient care and what I knew about patients being afraid to be pregnant in Missouri and the health care that they could not get, to me that just sounded like everyday speak, and it didn't sound fancy and it didn't sound politically knowledgeable, but that was the piece that resonates with everyday voters. And that's the piece that we need to get out there. And you know, every time that Luz and I have an opportunity to speak and I tell a story, just a regular story about things that have happened to my patients. Now I have to tell them in kind of broad brushstroke ways because patients would be readily identifiable by the exactness of their story. But if you tell the stories that you know to be true in general ways that don't violate patient care, people listen. And in these speeches, when the lights aren't in my face, and I can see people are moved. People are a little tearful, and people realize this isn't about what the politicians make you feel it's about. I mean, I know on Fox News that they're talking about abortionists and talking about people, you know, not wanting a boy and having an abortion at 32 weeks. That is not the story of healthcare in Missouri, and we all know that's not true. So in the same vein that we know that we're not doing permanent surgery on 12-year-olds when we talk about gender-affirming care, we're also not aborting 32-week fetuses because they're a boy and not a girl. And we need to get our voices out there and tell our story and just tell people what we know to be true as medical care. And you know, it was very shocking for me to learn that people are interested in that. And though everybody else speaks in terms that I find impressive, people really latch on to these little stories and the things that you can tell. And I'm sure aside from the two issues we're talking about today, you all can think of issues, whether it's, you know, pharmacy benefits or medical coverage or whatever else pops up in all of our patient care, and things that make you mad every day that are getting politicized instead of really thinking about patients. These are the things, you know, these are the things that you can do, and these are the things that you can effectuate. And these are the things that I've learned. When I first went to these meetings and they were talking in their lingo and not our lingo, I didn't know what IP meant. I didn't know what the process was. I mean, vaguely, I consider myself somewhat politically engaged, but really, when you latch on to people who are fighting the fight and organize yourselves in parallel, it's amazing how much you can learn, and working together, how effective this can be. So, when the litigation finally ended in November, honestly, at that point, I had formed a 501c3, see, learning. Because I really thought at this point we weren't gonna go forward. I really felt like the clock had run out, Missourians weren't enough on board, and it takes a lot of money. It was $48 million in Ohio. I think it was $47 million in Michigan. It's a lot of money. So as much as I willed it and kept saying to Tori and Luz, I can't wait another 2 years, we've got to do this. Really, in the end, I can't raise $47 million, turns out. And what you really need to do is show people nationally that we can do this and that there's a chance in this state, so that they'll put their weight and their money behind it. We still have to raise money, but you know, all of these pieces have to fit into place. So I was under the impression that we weren't going to move forward. So I formed this advocacy group because I really thought that I was going to spend the next 2 years working with physicians across the state to move the needle, to get people to understand our issue. And I think like that's really important, and I hope that in the trans community that you can work on that issue, because God, people really, really don't understand. And we need to take ownership of the words freedom and making medical decisions without politicians being involved. And Missourians do relate to that. Missourians, if nothing else, want the government out of their business, that's for sure. And so I had planned to spend the next 2 years kind of doing that work. Then, right before Christmas, we got the news that actually it looked like we were going to be able to move forward, that we had everything we needed in the state, a good fiscal note, good ballot language, and good polling numbers, basically, that indicated that this thing can pass in Missouri. And so the ACLU and other groups went back to the national donors, and they said, yes, if you can raise $5 million by January 15th, which is the bare minimum to engage a voter collection firm, we will be in it with you. So that was Christmas, so of course nobody's raising money between Christmas and New Year's. So on January 2nd, I was told to go, and I learned another skill, which is that I can ask people for money. That has never been a forte, and I'm not even sure where we are in the slides. I'll just keep, okay, get involved. So anyway, turns out, you all know patients who are in big positions. And I had been kind of keeping a mental roll of patients I knew in big positions in the business community, where people do have substantial amounts of money and will to get things done if they're on your side. And at least in my issue, when you start talking about birth control or reproductive care or whatever, you can kind of see where people are coming from. And I'm very fortunate. I have such a great group of patients that honestly, if I just went work and home, I think Missouri was the most progressive state on earth. So, I had taken mental note of these patients. And when Luz and Tori, who's a 28-year-old dynamo who has litigated this thing through the whole court system of Missouri, which should be really, really motivating for you residents because she's you, just on the legal side. But anyway, when they said go, I started reaching out to these people. And they were happy that I had reached out. And a couple of them got very, very excited to be involved. And then they started asking their friends. And really started working their network of people who were in the business community, who had the means, and who were on our side in this issue. And in under 2 weeks, we crossed the $5 million mark. And we were able to decide that we were going to move forward because we were going to be able to engage this voter collection firm. So that was step one, and that was a really big thing for me and for the other doctors who were involved, was to get over the hump of asking your wealthy friends and people who feel passionately about it to ask their wealthy friends and to get fundraising happening. And every little bit counts, and every large bit counts a lot. And we were able to get a really large sum of money raised really quickly. The next phase was signature gathering and is signature gathering. And to give you perspective, I was told that Labor Day was the typical time that if you're going to get something on the ballot, you start collecting signatures. So as September went by, and October went by, and November went by, and even December went by, it really started to feel like they had done their job. They had delayed us, and we weren't going to be able to do it. But in Ohio, they collected over 500,000 signatures in 3 months. And the physicians were a large part of that. And so we're a smaller state, so our number is smaller. But to get 172,000 valid signatures, we need to collect almost double that amount. So we need over 300,000 signatures. So we kicked off in February. The official kickoff event was February 6th. I got the opportunity to speak, as did other physicians in other kickoff sites around the state, again, to tell the story, although we were kind of preaching to the choir at that point, but getting people motivated. And then we started doing these signature collection trainings. And so it's been really great to see physicians and other healthcare providers and medical students just yesterday get excited about putting themselves out there to collect signatures. I mean, in the first day I collected signatures, I think I sat myself at an event that I thought would be friendly, and lo and behold, 60 signatures, like in just the time that it takes to actually do the signatures. And then I got braver and went to the factory on Monday night and in front of a show. And, you know, I mean, people say no, and definitely there are people who say no way. But, you know, they do tend to just walk by, and then the next person comes and they say, I'm so glad you're here. Oh my God, yes, I will sign. And so, you know, the biggest bottleneck actually at this point in the campaign has been getting people trained, because the enthusiasm for the issue, both in the healthcare community and with our patients, is really high, and people want to be trained, and people want to feel like they're doing something tangible. And so, you know, I have played my role and have worked alongside everyone else under the umbrella of Missourians for Constitutional Freedom to get people trained and get those signatures happening. That's where we're at. I think we're going to be successful. We're ahead of schedule on signatures, and I think the more people that get trained, you know, it should be exponential, the number of signatures we can collect every week. And at that point, again, our group will be involved in writing op-eds, raising money, and getting our voices out there. Because again, as physicians, we are the most trusted voice in this fight. In Ohio, they did polling, and except for the extreme right, in every other voting group, physicians were the most powerful voice and the most trusted voice in the fight. And I think that's something that we just, I mean, it was astonishing to me, but I think it's also really motivating, and I hope it'll be motivating to you. And I hope once this issue is done, we can move on to transgender rights, which is the other most appalling issue in our state, in my mind. And we can just start having our voices be heard as physicians, because they're important, and we understand what is right, and we're not trying to politicize it. We just want to take care of our patients. And remember, that's powerful to people. So thank you so much for having us. Really appreciate you guys taking some time out of your day.
Luz, come in. So do you want to explain what is on your barcode here in the scan?
Yeah. So the QR code will take you straight to moconstitutionalfreedom.org, and that's the umbrella organization.
This is yours.
Oh, that's mine.
Yes,
oh,
we made
how
one
nice
for
of you. Thank you. Okay, that's mine. That takes you to moreprorights.com, and that's our organization, and that's my email through the organization. So I'll let you guys scan that, and then we're stuck. Oh, there it is. Okay.
So I went ahead and I included the information for the ACLU of Missouri. As I mentioned, we work on several issues. We'd love your support for Missourians for Constitutional Freedom, and if you're interested in other issues, please go ahead and get in contact with us. So I'll let you scan that.
The first QR code leads to one of those. This is trying to steal your information, not a safe website.
Oh, awesome. So it's moreprorights.com. This is another thing I'm incapable of. The other night I tried to make a QR code and realized, like, wow, I really lack some skills.
Well, and we tried to make one for you, so that's
yeah, no, I
on
wouldn't
us.
try myself. Anyway, moreprorights.com. This one's for ACLU. Hopefully it works better. And then this is for the campaign, moconstitutionalfreedom.org.
And I wanted to just emphasize there are many, many ways to get involved with the campaign. And if you look on the website, you can see all of the different events that are being hosted for trainings, or where you can go and sign the petition. And just to Dr. Smith's point, I'm very, very thrilled to share that, you know, the reason why we are playing catch up on training folks is really because we are at capacity in terms of like every time we put up a training session, it gets filled up right away. They're happening all over Missouri. And just by like a little anecdote is in the first like 3 weeks that the campaign launched, we had over 5,000 folks sign up to volunteer, which is more than any campaign in Missouri has seen over the entire course of their campaign. And we saw that in just the first 3 weeks. So it's really encouraging and inspiring to see that like motivation in Missouri for Missourians for constitutional freedom.
So can you just remind everybody when we need to gather these signatures by, because it seems like there's still a short timeline.
Yeah.
And remind people that these are not just signatures from the Central West End or St. Louis, but all counties. And so can you tell people a little bit more about the actual signatures, numbers needed, process?
Yeah, so we have to collect it's close to over 172,000 signatures in 6 out of the 8 congressional districts, reflecting 8% of the voting population. And everyone who signs has to be registered to vote. And those signatures, we have to collect them by May 5th. The reason we have to collect more, and we say, you know, we have to collect at least twice as that, is because there is a validation process. The Secretary of State, we know, will go through and challenge each and every signature and claim that they are invalid. So we really need to increase the level of signatures that we submit to show them that this is truly something that Missourians want on the ballot. And then we will see if we are placed on either the August 2024 ballot or the November 2024 ballot. I often get the question, which one is better? What I respond with, we know that whether we go in August or November, we can win.
And just to give you guys a little idea, because I know here at the med school, you know, you can't officially do signature collections or anything like that. A really effective way is to invite your friends over, just have a house party, and someone will come and collect everybody's signatures. We'll talk to the group, we'll not talk to the group, whatever you want. And, you know, some of us go to, you know, places outstate, like I sometimes go spend a weekend in St. Genevieve and help them out at their hospital. And I know someone who is a retired physician who is on this side. And so I asked him, could he organize a group? And so on March 9th, I'm headed down to St. Genevieve. And, you know, some of you have those connections as well. I have a friend whose parents live in Troy, Missouri, and they just had a death in the family, but I would like them because they know every Democrat in Troy, which I don't know how many that is, but anyway, they know them. And, you know, I will go and collect those signatures. So not to the point of Dr. Frazier is I'm trying to think of, okay, who do I know who's on my side in St. Charles County? Because most of St. Charles is Congressional District 3, and most of us here in this room are probably 1 and 2. And so just trying to think of my little touch points in areas outside of this room, but there's no such thing as too many signatures from St. Louis County. So there is no point where we would say, no, we don't want to come collect your signatures in St. Louis County, because there are more voters in St. Louis County, so we just need a large number still. But thinking outside the box of like, who do you know in other places is a really helpful tool.
A few minutes for questions. Does anybody have any questions? Megan?
I just saw that your website said Missouri law requires it to be on paper. Is it possible for us to download a form, sign it on paper, circulate to a family, or is it required to be a trained collector?
So we have printed forms that we are always happy to get to folks, and we do ask that if you're going to collect signatures that you do take a training with us. If you haven't done so already, the reason for that is because, again, we know that we are going to be under an incredibly high level of scrutiny, and so we want to make sure that everything is filled out correctly. Missouri petitions are not very, very common. You know, you have to sign first. There's very specific information that has to be included. So we're happy to come and talk to you. Dr. Smith and I were at an event on Tuesday, and we just said, anyone who wants to be trained, like, come and talk to us afterwards, and we're going to give you a really quick little training, and we'll hand you petitions so you can do that. Also, the signature pages have to be notarized, and there's particulars about, you know, you can't have different people from different counties or districts on the same signature page. There's a lot of nuances. So we ask that you, like, not just print out.
You can do it. It's not hard, but there are a lot of nuances.
Yeah.
And also we ask that nobody print out the signature collection page because the margins have to be just right. I mean, there are a lot of ridiculous rules. Yeah.
Yes.
If you're I learned that if you're a really good signature collector, 60 to 70% of your signatures will be validated, and that's if you're great. So that's the reason why.
My son got trained yesterday and said it was really great training. He learned a lot, was very fast, and so I would encourage people, you know, if you want to be an advocate and want to help with this process, the training is I think, very impactful and helps you get it done right.
Reach out. I'm happy. I've just done little groups, and I did one over at the med school yesterday with Tori. I've done them on Zoom. If you have a group of people who want to get trained, I don't care if it's a big group or a small group, I'm happy to do it. Well, if you organize a time, I will make it happen. Just reach out to me.
We could do that.
And you
Other
can reach out to us too.
Yeah.
Other questions?
This is more on the topic of getting your voice out there. So my state rep posts these summaries of what it's like to be in the definite minority party in Jeff City. And what will happen is that they'll have speakers, like they had physicians and families with trans youth, and then the Republicans just cut off the bait.
Yeah.
Before they won't hear them at all, any of them.
Yeah.
So if you have any ways of getting around that.
I'm personally not excited to go to Jeff City, and Tori's told me I don't have to, because that I think would be very frustrating for my personality. I don't like that. But I think that your target is the voting population of Missouri. You know, I think you want to get in the newspapers, you want to get earned media, because, you know, I had a little letter to the editor published, and it was amazing because, you know, the Post-Dispatch ignores me, but they do publish letters to the editor, and it was amazing how many people saw that. And so in my mind, the more impactful thing, because you want to take this to the voters eventually, is to advocate to change the voting population's opinion about your issue. So that's me. Luz has to go to Jeff City. We don't have to go to Jeff City, and they purposely make it hard for physicians. They'll say like, oh, we're gonna have this hearing next Monday at noon. Well, I mean, we can't do that as physicians. We can't just up and cancel our day. I mean, we could, but they know that that's hard for us, so they make it hard. So honestly, learn how to write, get the paper's attentions. Hopefully then news organizations will want to interview you. It's amazing how your name kind of just gets out there. And I think that's probably the better way of handling it.
Well, and so yes, we have
Yes,
to go.
and?
I have to go to Jefferson City. My team has to go to Jefferson City. And I mentioned there are different forms of lobbying, right? So Missouri makes it really hard for the public to provide public input. Often they release the time of a hearing on an issue or a bill that they're considering 24 hours maybe in advance. And so it's go, go, go if we're gonna show them publicly where, you know, how this will impact the community. It's really hard. And they do often cut off the time. So a lot of the effective lobbying actually happens behind closed doors. And you may not be able to get into a closed door discussion with someone who is on the extreme fringe of the issue, but there are lots of folks who you may not think are allies who can be influenced behind closed doors. And I've experienced that. We actually had some successes a few years prior with some legislators who are still there right now, with a lot of closed room, behind the scenes discussions with providers, where they got to ask providers like what I would consider kind of just surreal questions about how your body works. But they got to ask those questions and be informed by a medical expert, and they were like, oh, I thought it worked this way. And they were like, no, 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 that's not how your body works. And that actually led to some of them saying, well, look, I won't affirmatively push for this. I won't I'll just try to hang back, and it made an impact because it meant that was one less person pushing to get something through.
I think we've got to cut it off. If you have other questions, just come down. Thank you both so much.